Good morning. We're going to get started shortly.
Quiet, please. Thank you.
Good morning. So we're going to do a little consolidation today, similar to what we did yesterday, consultation with the administration. So we will have testimony to start from finance, revenue, and then Mr. DeBoe will be here for any questions or needs from the sinking fund, Board of Pensions, and City Treasurer. And then we'll do testimony from the Office of Property Assessment and the Board of Revision of Taxes if needed, if that's okay with the colleagues. Or unless you all want to hear all of the testimony. All right. I'm sorry. So we're going to start out with testimony from Mr. DeBoe from Finance, and we'll have Department of Revenue just for their opening testimony, and Mr. DeBoe will be here to call up if needed, but to respond to any issues with respect to the sinking fund, the Treasurer, Board of Directors. They are here, so if you need them to come up and speak and respond to any questions. And then because of the significance of the Office of Property Assessment, they will also offer testimony also. So essentially, these are all very connected departments, so we're just going to consolidate and just do it, and hopefully we can run through it in about an hour. Nah, I'm just kidding. Not going to happen. All right, so we'll get started. Mr. DeBoe, are you guys ready? We'll get started. Ready? Good morning. This hearing is called to order. I recognize the presence of a quorum of the committee members. This is the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 230-144, 230-145, 230-146, 230-147, 230-148, 230-149, and resolution number 230-162. Mr. McDermott, please read the titles of the bills and resolutions.
Bill number 230144, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2024 to 2029 inclusive. Bill number 230145, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2024 capital budget. Bill number 230146, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2024. Bill number 230147, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1500 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Wage and Net Profits Tax by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 230148, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-2800 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority on Taxes on Wages and Net Profits to provide for the continuation of the tax to make other conforming changes, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 230149, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-2600 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Business Income and Receipts Taxes by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Resolution number 230162, providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia, a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2024 through 2028 and incorporating revised changes with respects to fiscal year 2023, which is to be submitted by the Mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement authorized by an ordinance of this Council and signed by the Mayor on January 3rd, 1992, by and between the City and the Authority.
Thank you. McDermott. It's okay. Today, we will continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2024, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal year 2024 through fiscal 2029. Today we'll hear testimony from the administration regarding the administration finances. This morning we will hear the testimony from the Department of Finance, Department of Revenue, the Office of Property Assessment, the Board of Revision of Taxes. This afternoon, which may be today, this morning, we will originally scheduled here testimony from the sinking fund, the Board of Pensions, and the Treasurer. Given the overlap of these departments and duties, these departments are available for questions this morning. Mr. McDermott, first person to testify is?
Finance Director Rob DuBois.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Council President and members of Council. I'm Rob DuBois, Director of Finance, and I'm pleased to provide testimony today in support of the Office of the Director of Finance's FY2024 operating budget. Joining me at the table is First Deputy Finance Director Kat Lamb, and other representatives of finance are here to answer any questions you might have. Our proposed core budget is just under $16.5 million. That's a $1.5 million increase over our FY23 estimated obligation level. The increase is to support collectively bargained and exempt wage increases, increased insurance costs because of a hardening market, and added positions to build up our financial management capabilities. You have a copy of our written testimony, which includes our plans for FY24, our demographics, a summary of our budget, contract summary. You also have written testimony from the Board of Revision of Taxes, the City Treasurer's Office, and the Sinking Fund Commission, and representatives of those agencies are here to answer any questions you may have. Before concluding my testimony, I just want to take a moment to thank all the employees in finance and pensions and revenue and CTO and OPA for all their hard work and dedication. That concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Should I do the tax testimony now or do that later? Okay. Good morning, Council President, members of City Council. My name is Rob DuBois. I'm joined by Frank Breslin. He's right there. And he's the Revenue Commissioner. We're here to testify in support of Bills 230149 and 230147. Those two bills lower the rates for the resident portion of the wage and net profits tax and the net income portion of the business income and receipts tax. The changes in the two bills will combine to reduce the amount of tax due from businesses and workers by $28.2 million in FY24 and provide tax relief of about $13.7 million for employees and $14.5 million for businesses. Over the course of the 5-year plan, those reductions would total about $150 million. The taxes are already at their lowest rate in decades, and these further reductions will continue to promote a fair tax structure for residents and businesses. The rates will make Philadelphia a more competitive and attractive place to do business. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on these bills, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Get into a couple of questions. Some might be a little repetitive from yesterday, but that's how we do. I want to talk about wage and net profits tax reduction that happened last year, first time in a whole lot of years, so all of us were pretty excited about the prospects of sending the appropriate signal. And then there is an additional proposal to reduce same taxes during the course of the next fiscal. As it relates to the 5-year plan, and I know that's just a plan, what thought had been given to putting a reduction throughout the plan for those taxes? And do you also, and I know it's early, were there any signs that in any way, shape, or form that those tax reductions created an environment at a minimum, a level of expression of interest by people saying now that Philadelphia is on the path towards getting a fair tax system, that we are interested in locating in the city and interested in staying in the city? And I know that's somewhat of a speculative analysis, but I'm just wondering if it's somehow.
Yeah, so first on the tax rates, whether to do 1 year or 5 years, we did have a lot of discussion about what to do, and there are decent arguments for either approach. In the end, we thought we wanted to go deeper in the first year and do more of it right up front and have that cut guaranteed. In terms of what it means for businesses, there have been studies over the years that show that reducing these two taxes in particular makes us more competitive and helps us attract jobs. and that back in the years when we were actually increasing these taxes, it cost us tens of thousands of jobs. We also know that the Chamber was really supportive of the decreases last year and said that that would be really important in terms of attracting and retaining businesses.
How do we market this new direction in the city of Philadelphia? Yesterday we had a number of questions about marketing for employees and a number of other things that we do in the city. But if nobody knows what we're doing, frankly speaking, it doesn't necessarily matter. Do we have like a marketing strategy? I can remember as actually pre-pandemic that the city of New York, they had this very aggressive marketing program about their tax-free zones and all of the other aspects of what they do to attract businesses and retain businesses. Did we take that tax reduction and turn it into some sort of marketing strategy to promote what we're doing here in the city?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'd have to kind of talk to Commerce to get a better answer, so we'll get back to you on that.
Who?
Commerce, who would
Commerce.
do the business attraction.
Okay. Yeah, that would be helpful before we leave today, because this is, when we make these decisions, we want them to be prudent decisions, but we also like to see something materialized in a positive way, not just cut taxes for the sake of cutting taxes.
Right.
And in particular taxes, we want to do them in a targeted way that they're beneficial to what we're trying to ultimately achieve. Thank you. The recession and inflation reserve, as you know, we were fortunate enough to have a significant fund balance last time around. Recession reserves, rainy day fund, all of those good things. Had no idea that the pandemic was coming. Pandemic came, and fortunately we did have those funds that allowed us to make it through without any very aggressive layoffs and elimination of services. What are we going to do to ensure, and hopefully we'll never have that happen again, but you just never know, that we'll have that stopgap?
Yep. So in the early years of the plan, as we talked about, we have healthy fund balances while we have the ARP money.
Right.
We use that time to build up the Budget Stabilization Reserve Fund, and we've assumed that the charter change will pass. And as we discussed yesterday, so there are some healthy contributions to that reserve fund, which would help us have something to draw on, if there's another dramatic turn down. And then we also, as you mentioned, we put money in the recession and inflation reserve to give us extra support in case we do see another turn down. So those two together will help us in the back years of the plan when our fund balance gets really low. It gets down to about $120 million in the last year of the plan, which is only about 2% of revenues.
Right. In our conversations with the school district, understand that they may have some challenges in the later 5-year plan. Have we given any thought about how we address that? Or because I think that primarily their concern is about the lack of growth in revenue, like froze assessments this year. So you probably won't have a significant amount of revenue going to the school district as a result of that. And then, we put protection measures in place as we're supposed to do in city council.
Right. Yeah. So we have, since the beginning of this administration, working with council, increased our contribution to the school district. Started about $104 million a year. By next year, it's going to be $282 million a year. And while we are not doing assessments this year, we assume that we'll be doing them going forward. So there are revenue increases built into our projections and the school district's projections going forward. I do think that the real solution for the school district is the state, that we have been doing our part, and we've been increasing our contribution dramatically. And as the court decision showed, the state's not doing what it should be doing in terms of funding education across the state.
Okay. And my last question before I relinquish the mic. Talked about this yesterday. I'm going to probably beat the drum on this one pretty much every day. The Neighborhood Preservation Initiative, City Council's cornerstone $400 million program. I just want to get it on the record again as you're here today as a finance director. We are $200 million in in terms of borrowing. Probably won't get to 400 this fiscal year, but looking to get at least a 300 million. So if we can show, and I don't know what the threshold is for the treasurer, we had some discussion when we were looking to do the 200 million.
We want to make sure that the program gets funded, and that when we're ready for the next borrowings, that we're ready to go. We also, as we talked about yesterday, don't want to borrow prematurely and be holding on to money that's not spent. So we will continue to work with people who are running the programs to make sure the money gets spent and to be ready to go when they're ready for the next tranche.
All right. So since we have the treasurer here, I know I'm kind of catching people off guard. Can we have the treasurer talk to the threshold? Because there was some conversation about what the threshold was. At one point, and I know this is a little deep in the weeds maybe for you at your level, funds committed versus funds spent. That was a whole conversation. We had committed a certain level of dollars that were not available based on that commitment, and the question was, could we move forward on the next borrowing? So I just want to get a little clarity. Is it funds committed or is it funds actually spent? Because the challenge with government, we take so long to actually spend money, which is unlike most people. So if we're looking to do another 100 during the course of this fiscal, can you kind of tell us what that threshold will be?
Sure. Good morning, Council President and members of City Council. Jackie Dunn, City Treasurer. For borrowings, we typically look to monitor the pace of spend, as the Finance Director mentioned, before we move forward with the next routine borrowing.
I'm sorry, could you move the mic a little closer?
Sure. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. For borrowings, we typically look to schedule the transaction 2 to 3 months from when we need the next round of proceeds. So we work with the departments who are doing the spending to understand what that pace of spend down is, to make sure that we're lining up the next borrowing in time to be able to do that transaction for when they need the cash available.
The cash available for the debt service payments. Is that what you're concerned about?
Sure, the cash available to actually spend on the projects. So when they're ready to requisition or to invoice for the programs.
So the question was, and I'll get a little more specific. We had committed $100 million or close to 100 to the program, all aspects of the program. That money was off the table for any future commitments because it's already committed under the way the program is structured. Once you commit it, that's off the table. So my question is, if the 100 that we have now is committed to projects across the board, will we be in a position to borrow the next 100 million?
Sure. So the NPI office and the departments that are receiving funding under NPI are doing a very good job with moving those projects forward, and we're seeing frequent requisitions or requests for funding to actually draw those funds down on a cash basis. So my understanding is that the funds are budgeted fully from that first borrowing to projects. This body passed a resolution for the second year budget for NPI for this next $100 million borrowing that we'll be doing in early May. And we will work closely with the NPI team to watch how they are able to spend those dollars from this second $100 million borrowing down over the next couple months.
You say spend down. My question is commitment versus spend.
Correct.
You're being like really elusive. I'm just asking a simple question.
Sure. We look at
100 million is committed. That is not available for any other future projects or programs, right? Based on the NTI program. Are we now in a position to borrow the next 100 million? Because under our understanding, that 100 million is no longer available. So can we borrow the next 100 million? This is like, it's not necessarily a yes or no question, but it kind of is.
Sure. So when I talk about spending, we are looking on the cash basis, so dollars actually out the door, because when we do a borrowing, when we borrow those funds, we have to pay debt service and interest costs on them, and so we want, on a cash basis, my job is to make sure that the city is not paying those costs before we're ready to use the dollars. So that's why we work very closely with the NPI team to understand and try to marry their budget needs with their cash needs.
So that sounds like a no.
Right now, we are borrowing the second $100 million in early May, so those proceeds, those full $100 million will be available for them to spend for those year 2 programs. And then, as the finance director noted, we'll be closely watching how quickly they spend those dollars.
So that sounds like a no.
Correct, not at this time. Our first focus is to have that second transaction go as well as possible, get the lowest cost of capital to make sure we get those debt service costs down.
So, Mr. DeBoe, since we had this discussion early on, and there was an agreement not to go full force with the $400 million borrowing because we understood having $400 million and the city's ability to spend the $400 million was just beyond unlikely. So we agreed in this $100 million. So now it sounds like I'm hearing the treasurer say that until all the money is spent, we will not borrow the next 100. And given the inability for government, for whatever reason, to spend money that's sitting there on very much needed projects, I'm a little concerned about this whole spend conversation. And through no fault of anybody else's other than the city's inability to spend money on stuff that's needed.
Right. So our goal is to make sure that projects aren't held up because there's not funding available. I know there are a couple of different things going on, right? There are some projects for which a commitment essentially does mean the money's gone, but there are also projects for which it doesn't, and for which until the money's spent, there is cash available that can be used for projects. And so we want to make sure we get this right and make sure that we're not holding up projects, but that we also aren't borrowing early. So I know you're saying it's kind of a yes or no, but it's not really, because I think we have to look at the different funding streams and the restrictions on them to understand what they mean in terms of our need to get additional funding in.
Okay, so, all right, so this will be my response. And we'll keep having this conversation. I don't want to tie this up on this one particular issue. We will not be in a position to spend $100 million because the city can't spend money for whatever reason. And this archaic process of invoices and getting money out on the street. We're actually sitting here now getting a call from the NACs, and you know what the NACs are. They haven't gotten a paycheck in 4 months, all right? 4 months, and these are people out in the neighborhoods, 20 of them across the city, right? And they have no benefits, they have no health care, and they're making $35,000 a year, and we can't give them their money, which is something else that I don't understand, right? So basically, we will not be in a position to spend the money based on the city's archaic process. So we're not going to be in a position to borrow the next $100 million, is what you're basically telling me.
I think it's probably too early to say that. We kind of want to see where we are going to monitor it closely. And we will work closely to make sure we get there so that we can actually continue to provide funding.
Okay, and this is my last statement on this one. So, one second. So the city's ability to spend all of these capital dollars that we are borrowing money for, right, where we have rebuild projects, we have recreation projects and all these other capital projects that we don't spend in a timely fashion, right, but yet we borrow the money. Every year we got a ballot question on it. We're going to borrow the money and we don't spend it in a timely fashion. 2, 3, 4 years, we're still waiting for the groundbreaking for a rec center. That's okay. That's okay to borrow that money
We
and
don't
leave
borrow.
that money sitting around. Yeah, we do borrow money.
We won't borrow that until so for capital, we don't borrow until our capital fund cash is low. We budget based on our cash, we borrow based on our cash needs.
We borrow what?
We borrow based on our cash needs. So when you're talking about our
Yeah, and
borrowings, that's done based on when we are low on cash for
So
capital.
do we spend the money?
Before we borrow, yes.
Okay, so you're spending the money, then you borrow money to replenish the spend.
Right.
Okay.
We don't
so
do it
that
based
means
on
that you have cash on hand to spend on capital projects, and then you borrow the money. Is that what you're saying?
We borrow money when we don't have enough cash on hand to replenish our cash. Yes.
Okay, so if we were able to take cash on hand that we have, such as the American Recovery Plan money, cash on hand, and we spend that money and then we borrow money to replenish that money, that's okay.
So one of the things that we're recommending, right, is that we do some pay-go, right, to use operating money, just like you're talking about, to put into projects. But that also means that we're pushing back when we do our borrowing because we'll have more cash on hand. So we use that actually to make sure that we can borrow later.
Okay. All right, so this will be an ongoing conversation.
Understood.
Because I'm just looking at the treatment, and you know where I'm at on this. It's the neighborhood versus, and this who wants priorities and the whole 9 yards, neighborhood versus other things, bridges and some of this other things that we borrow money for. We will have a very thoughtful conversation about this, because the answer I got out of this conversation, and I apologize to my colleagues for, going on and on with this. I'm just trying to get this commitment that we will not be borrowing the next $100 million. That's my take out of this conversation. All right. So look forward to a follow-up.
Right. I'm not, okay. Yes.
I'm just saying, if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong.
I think we don't know. Basically, we want to see what happens over the next 5 months. So I don't know whether that's right or wrong yet.
Okay. Okay, thank you. My apologies to my colleagues. Just need to get clarity on that. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm sorry. Councilman, I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass. I'm sorry.
I just had a quick
The
question
Treasurer.
regarding the conversation you were just having, Mr. President. I just wanted to know, what was the debt service? What was the amount of the debt service on the $100 million that was borrowed?
I guess it was around $7 million.
$7 million.
So about $7 million.
Yeah, although that was in a slightly different interest rate environment, so it'd probably be closer to $9 million for the next.
$7 to $9 million.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a thought, but I don't want to belabor the point, but I'll speak with you offline, Mr. President.
Yeah, no, it's like $9 million. I would think that that's not a big deal, given the $5 to $6 billion enterprise. So we're concerned about having to spend $9 billion on debt service payments a month on this borrowing, the next $100 million borrowing. But again, I said I wasn't going to talk about this anymore at this point. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to shift the question slightly to cover a couple of basics. What is our total taxable real estate in value in the city of Philadelphia, A? What is our real estate tax owed to us, B? And what is the amount of taxes on Philadelphia real estate owned by individuals outside of the city, and what are those collection rates? So let me repeat. How much is in the universe of taxable real estate? How much of that is represented by individuals who own properties elsewhere? How much do they owe us? And how have we been able to collect? If you remember a couple of cycles back, that was a big issue with the state where we wanted to be able to place liens on outside real estate that people who own Philadelphia real estate were delinquent here, but were current in other municipalities. So how have we evolved in that regard? And then what is the non-taxable real estate owned by nonprofits and universities? So if we could cover that in my first round.
Yep. I'm going to ask Revenue Commissioner Breslin to come up and give that information.
Frank Breslin, Revenue Commissioner. I don't have the answer to the first question, Council Member, of the total taxable properties in the city, but I can get that for you. In terms of the delinquency, the principal delinquency is $234 million that's owed. That's $204 million of that is owed by Philadelphian, properties owned by Philadelphians. Pennsylvania, but not Philadelphia, is $15 million, and out of Pennsylvania is $15 million. So over 80% of the, closer to 87% of the delinquency is from Philadelphia owners, and then the balance is from outside Philadelphia or out of state. What we do in terms of enforcement for out of state and out of Philadelphia is, of course, we use our normal enforcement protocols, which are, delinquent noticing, sheriff sales, which are currently paused, but foreclosure is currently paused, but we would use foreclosure. In addition, for out of state, we use a lien process where we can place liens on multiple properties, which has been very effective.
Both Philadelphia-based and other places?
Yes, so if the owner is outside of Pennsylvania, owns property in Philadelphia, which they are delinquent on, but own other properties outside of Pennsylvania, we can also place liens on those out of Pennsylvania properties, including their principal residence outside of Pennsylvania. In addition, we do consolidated actions, which are done by the law department, where we will take all of their delinquencies. So we're not just looking at their delinquencies in real estate, but also, very often a tax delinquent also is delinquent in water and other fees and fines. There might be L&I fines against the property. So we'll lump all of that together and go after all of that at one time. So that's been very effective as well.
So if I got this right, $30 million worth of outside of Philly and outside of Pennsylvania. That number has obviously gone down over the years. Is it a correlation with Pennsylvania allowing us to place these liens in other municipalities?
That has helped. That has helped, yes.
To what degree?
The number has been fairly stable in those percentages, but the delinquency has gone down. That has helped to reduce the delinquency. I think there's a perception, and there has been a perception, that more of the delinquency is attributable to outside of Philadelphia and outside Pennsylvania owners, but that has not really been the case. It's always been, over 80%, well over 80% of that delinquency attributable to Philadelphia owners.
So we are still going to find that number about taxable real estate within the city of Philadelphia, but how much real estate within the city of Philadelphia?
I can answer that now if you want.
Oh, yes, please.
It's $154 billion of assessed value, and that does not include homesteads. That would take about $10 billion off to get it to about $144 billion.
And with that, what percentage of the real estate beyond that taxable is owned by nonprofits, universities, and the others? What does that number look like?
I think it was about a quarter, but we'll get confirmation of that.
Okay. And are there any active pilots where there, in lieu of taxes, kind of arrangements we've managed to work with nonprofits and big universities at all?
Yes, there is a relatively small amount of pilots. We'll get the pilot number for you.
Yeah, I mean, as we start to look at tax abatements, as we start to look at other assessments at AVI, we have to keep these kinds of numbers in our mind so that it is an equitable, fair kind of process, that people who are living in neighborhoods don't bear the burden unfairly to keep our our municipality afloat. So we, at some point, might want to consider, as we look at some of the nonprofits and big mega nonprofits that fit the title of nonprofit, but for all intents and purposes could be Fortune 500 companies, to look at them and say, in lieu of taxes, what can you do? What are you willing to do voluntarily for the city of Philadelphia? And how do we monetize that to be a contribution that we might look at every 5 years and say, here's how you can be helpful. When we look at universities that are working with our public schools, there's one in the 3rd district. What is that called? Penn Alexander. That might be that kind of formula that we evaluate every 5 years and say, no, you're not paying real estate taxes, but look what your contribution is. And I think we have reached a time in this city where we might want to consider those kinds of evaluation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning, Rob. How are you today? I just have a couple
Good morning.
questions.
How you doing?
Good morning. Just have a couple questions regarding revenue and the various tax relief measures that we offer to our residents. In last budget cycle, I championed the Save Our Homes budget initiative that focused on various tax relief measures to support our residents. Obviously, in some areas, as a result of gentrification and high development, we're seeing a significant increase in real estate taxes. And so my questions are as follows. How much did we budget last year for the senior citizens tax freeze, and how many individuals has actually signed up for the senior citizens tax freeze program? Same thing for our favorite program, which is LOOP, long-time owner occupants program. How much did we budget last year, and how many people and how much of that budget has actually already been spent? And the same thing for the homestead exemption. I think I tried to go for 100%, and we negotiated down to 80%. So I want to get an idea of how much was budgeted last year, and again, how many people have signed up, and also how much of the budget has been spent for those three tax relief initiatives.
Hold on 1 second. Deputy Commissioner Lopez-Chris from Revenue is going to come answer those relief questions.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Rebecca Lopez-Chris, Deputy Revenue Commissioner for Policy and Outreach. Currently, for tax year 2023, we have We have 234,790 folks in Homestead. We have 14,187 in Loop. Now, those numbers include folks who are in the senior tax freeze because you can have both programs at the same time. I'm sorry? Yeah, I can also provide this report to you. It's 234,790 in Homestead. 14,187 in Loop. Currently, there are 19,066 participants in the senior freeze. About 2/3 of those actually get a benefit. A third of them haven't had an increase in their assessed value, so while they're protected, if there's an increase that occurs, currently they don't have a benefit.
Awesome. And so give me an idea in the last part, within the three questions that I asked, what's the dollar amount that will be left over in these three categories moving forward? And then I'll wrap up with how are we going about making sure the citizens here in the city of Philadelphia are informed of the various tax relief measures? Because on one end, with the assessments, I know we're not doing any this year, but they'll come at some point in time again. With the assessments that are already taking place, how are we going about informing the wider public that, hey, take advantage of these tax relief measures?
Absolutely. For the senior freeze, there's currently, seniors are saving just over $8.2 million. Homestead has seen a significant increase with the increase to the value. It's currently about $260 million saved by owner-occupied properties. And Loop, we're at about $31.6 million. And as you know, there's a $35 million cap on that.
All right. And maybe I'm not asking the question the right way. Not how much has been saved, but Rob, the amount we budgeted last year through negotiations. So let's say we put aside $150 million for Loop, right? Based upon the amount of people who have actually participated, did we hit that number, or is there going to be money left over that we can transfer into 24?
Yeah, that one.
That's what I'm getting.
Yep, I got it. We'll have to get back to you with that.
Okay.
And so
Because that's an important number.
I know exactly what you're
in
asking. You're
terms of-
asking, what did we assume we were going to give to relief measures? What's actually happened, and what's the difference?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we will get you that.
And I guess in more layman's terms, how much money are we leaving on the table in those three areas for FY24?
To your question about outreach, I think Revenue has a really robust outreach group, and I think as we end some of the pandemic precautions, we're able to get back to sort of our bread and butter, which is in-person outreach. I think many council members know Vicki Riley, who is an exceptional person. We love her. She does great work, and she, you know, I think there's nothing that beats like sort of that personal connection. And so I think while we do a lot of social media work, and we do a lot of videos, the reality is we need to get people at events. And I think we've always made it clear to City Council that we are absolutely dedicated to working with each council member to develop programs that are going to, or excuse me, like outreach events that are going to work specifically for your constituents.
And let me be totally transparent and give you and your team a shout out. They've participated in various tax relief workshops and forums that we've had throughout the 2nd Councilmanic District. In person is always better than not in person because of the digital divide. You see a lot of seniors and a lot of people who may not be as savvy when it comes to doing things on social media or online, don't have the benefit of participating. But when you do these workshops in person, it goes a long way to solving people's tax issues. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning to the administration. I'm actually going to stick with Councilmember Johnson's line of questioning. I'm inspired. How many people do we estimate are eligible for one of the three programs we discussed, but for some reason or another, whether it was advertisement or things like that, when we're unable to opt in? Because I remember when we were going through this, and I think it was Councilmember Johnson actually who wanted people to automatically be included in it because of the pandemic, and you guys told us that that wasn't an option. So I'm wondering, based on the numbers you just gave, it seems like about 260,000 Philadelphians, give or take, are taking advantage of these three programs. How many people are eligible for the programs that are not taking advantage?
That's a really great question. The total enrolled is about 266,000. We estimate that we are hitting about 80% of eligible folks. So the census reports or estimates that there's about 338,000 owner-occupied properties in Philadelphia, and we know how many folks are enrolled in a program. We have been able to make strides in auto-enrollment projects. We have a number of them that we are working on currently. So for example, we are collaborating with our partners in the mayor's office and also in health to look at Medicaid data. Are there seniors in that group that we're able to auto-enroll in the senior freeze? We're looking at folks who receive water benefits. Can we auto-enroll them in senior freeze and or vice versa into TAP? So there's a number of ways that we're working to auto-enroll folks. Whenever somebody applies for a payment agreement and they don't have Homestead, we automatically enroll them in Homestead. So if you apply for senior freeze and for whatever reason you don't have Homestead, we make sure that you have it and receive that benefit.
Thank you. My last question for this particular topic is, when you look at where we are as it relates to these three things, how many homeowners do you think we have saved, right? So if we're saying 266,000 people, which is about 80% of the people who are eligible to be involved in these programs are involved, approximately how many of those folks would have either lost their home or been forced to sell their home? Do you have an estimate of that, or is that a tough question to ask?
That's a tough question.
Okay, curious.
I think one thing to keep in mind are things like the owner-occupied payment agreement, which we worked very closely with City Council to implement. That's a program, it's a very powerful program to protect homes from sheriff sale, and homeowners can get into that program up until the day of the sale. And so the reality is there is no reason why a person who has delinquent taxes in the city of Philadelphia shouldn't get protected or shouldn't have options for protection from sheriff sale.
Okay, that's good to hear. And I heard the sheriff, I met with the sheriff about a similar issue as well. So it's great to hear that we're protecting homeowners the way we are. I tell people all the time that Philadelphia has more protections for homeowners than any other major city in the entire country, and that's something that we're proud of. Let me transition to pension. Based on your projections, the pension fund should be 80% funded by 2029 and 100% funded by 2033. What have we done as it relates to the work for the pension fund pre-pandemic and during the pandemic to put us in a position to be on this trajectory?
Thank you so much for that question. First, the projections that will be at 80% and 100% come from our actuary, based on where they see it going. There were a lot of things that went into that. One was changes that we made in collective bargaining to how the pension structure works. For new employees, they would have a hybrid pension instead of a strictly defined benefit pension. We changed the way we fund the pension system so that instead of just putting in the amount that's required by the state, we've gone to a new funding policy where we put in more than that. We call it the revenue recognition policy. So there's sales tax revenue that goes to the pension fund, there are contributions from employees that go to the pension fund. Both of those we don't count against our state required contribution. They're over and above the state contribution. We changed the way that we handle our investments so that we lowered the cost of our investments so that we save about $15 million a year in direct costs. So that's just a direct benefit to the fund. All of those things together have meant that we have more assets because we put in more than is required by the state, and the increase in our liabilities has slowed down because of the things we've done on the benefit side. And that has required kind of partnership with unions, administration, council, state legislature.
Sure. And I think what, I think we've clearly done a great job with it. I think what the next phase of it is, yesterday we had the chief of staff to the mayor's office testify about the transition and the transition process. And we didn't do a deep dive into things that are a priority, but will the work that's been done to reform the pension fund over the last couple years be a significant part of the information that we assure is transition to the next administration? Because we don't want to put ourselves in a position where the people who are working hard for the city of Philadelphia, one day retire and that pension fund is in jeopardy because of some unforeseen incidents that might have taken place.
Yeah, we agree that retirement income security is really crucial. One of the things the chief of staff talked about yesterday was the transition documents we're putting together.
Sure.
And we made sure that the document we're putting together includes information on all the work we've done on pensions and why it's so crucial that continues going forward.
Thank you. And I just want to give a special thank you to Fran, Chris, and Bill, who all work over there as it relates to the pension work. I know myself, I personally run into issues in my staff. We've run into issues as it relates to pension and pension payment and issues with One Philly and the folks over at the pension board and everybody over there. Extremely helpful, very transparent, and help put my team and I in a position to be able to make sure that we understand everything that's going on, not just for us, but other city employees who might come to my office with similar issues. Let me just close out with a question about Bert.
Thank you for that, because
Great
they
group
do
over
great
there.
work, and they've done great work for the retirees of the city.
Great job, very important. And when we talk about retaining staff, you know, that stuff got to be intact. My last question, Council President, and then I'll tee up for the second round, Bob. When we talk about the BERT tax cut, when the projections coming out of last year's budget negotiations was that it would end up costing us about $8 million a year, $40 million over 5 years. I'm wondering, based on the revenue that we collected post-pandemic and the projections that you all had, did that actualize? Did it actually cost us $8 million, or were we able to collect more revenue because of lowering the BERT tax?
Right. So that's a complicated question. Let me try to take it in a couple of things. So if you just looked at kind of the cost of the change in the rate, because collections were more than we thought they were going to be, it actually probably cost us more because each percent was worth more because the base was larger and that generated more tax revenue. But the other question you're asking, which is the really important question, is what does it mean for our economy and our jobs? And in the long run, is the tax base higher because we've cut rates? And every study we've seen over time says yes, that's the case, and that those cuts help grow our base and help generate more revenue for us in the long term.
I'll come back second round around BERT. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Brooks.
Thank you. So in the budget hearings, we often hear about how we do not have enough money for essential programs like affordable housing or making our schools buildings safe. However, the choice we make on taxes sets the limit on this funding. The business tax reduction that is included in this budget is expected to cost $75 million over the next 5 years. This is $75 million that we cannot spend to protect our school children from expenses, to clean our streets, and to combat violence in our neighborhoods. When people talk about cutting business taxes, they often talk about the benefit to small businesses and black and brown owned businesses. But most BERT tax is going to mega corporations like Comcast, who stand to gain hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax cuts, while most small business will only get a few dollars in relief. If we are serious about helping small black and brown businesses thrive, we could actually exempt them from BERT taxes rather than just lowering the rate for all corporations, big or small. We have already exempted small business that have less than $100K in gross receipts from BERT. I benefited from this exemption when I owned my small businesses. The business provided barely enough income for me to pay the bills. A significant tax burden could have sent me out of business. So I understand the need for actual small business phase, but we can provide this tax relief in a more significant, more targeted, effective way. So the question is, currently businesses are exempt from BERT taxes if they have less than $100,000 in gross receipts. If we raise this exemption, for example, to $200,000, how much revenue would we be giving up?
To get back to you on that, and there are also some legal issues around that we'd want to discuss with you. I said we have to get back to you with a number, and there are also legal issues that we'd want to discuss with you.
So there are legal numbers just by moving it up to include more businesses along the threshold?
Yes, and we'd rather discuss that with you outside the hearing.
Okay. Because I believe that raising the exemption rate is a better way to provide tax relief for small businesses that actually need it, rather than a proposed broad BERT tax that mostly benefits mega corporations, that need it the least. My next one is about wage taxes. The reduction in wage tax is the budget proposal suffers from the same problem as the BERT tax reduction. It provides the most relief to the rich while cutting our ability to spend money on essential like affordable housing and anti-violence programs. Last year, when the city reduced the wage tax, the average worker in Philadelphia saved 75 cents on a paycheck, while the richest Philadelphia saved thousands of dollars a year. The wage tax reduction in the budget will cost our city another $75 million over the next 5 years. That is more than 10 times the new funding for supportive housing for Philadelphians suffering from chronic homelessness and twice the cost of expanding eviction defense attorneys citywide. Low-income Philadelphians need wage tax relief, but if we are serious about helping low-income people thrive, we could do so much more effectively than bills that cut taxes for millionaires. One way is to make wage tax refunds automatically. Currently, the low-income workers in Philadelphia qualify for a wage tax refund, but people must go through a separate application process that few people know about. Other governments provide automatic refunds when someone completes their taxes. We should do the same here in Philadelphia. So the question is, can you please outline the process that low-income Philadelphians need to go through to apply for wage tax reduction and what information they need to provide at that time?
I'll ask Revenue to come up to provide that information, but also talk about the wage tax reductions in general as they're coming up. So I agree that each year the reductions by themselves are relatively small, but over time they've actually been fairly substantial. When we started this program, the wage tax rate was close to 5%. Now, as you were proposing to get it down into the 3.7, 3.8 range, so it's come down a lot. It's been an important way to make the city more attractive. And again, multiple studies have shown that that helps create jobs in the city, which winds up actually providing more revenue rather than less over the long term. But with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Breslin to talk about the application process.
Yes, so the application process for the low-income wage tax refund, it's our refund process. They have to fill out an application. They have to, the applicant has to supply income records, W-2s or whatever. And the reason for that is it would be very difficult. This question has come up in the past, and it would be very difficult to kind of do an auto-enroll or an automatic refund because there's income limitations here, and an employee can work for various employers, right? So we need all of the W-2s, and we have to add that income together to see that they qualify. And we don't have in our database, we don't have that information anywhere. And so that's the difficulty.
Is there a way it can just be attached to income tax? Because we're talking about low-wage workers that have limited time, and we're adding another step to them applying for taxes, and many folks don't even know this exists.
Right. So we do. Deputy Commissioner Lopez Chris talked about our robust communication. So we really use that in-person communication opportunity to try to get the word out there about this. We did have 8, I looked at the statistics for this year, and we've had 835 applicants. So,
that applied this year?
Yes, for $340,000. So that's an average refund of about $400. So it is a meaningful amount of money, and we work really hard to try to get the word out there to citizens that this money is available and aid them with the application process, because we understand that it can be burdensome. But this is not also a unique challenge to Philadelphia. I mean, we've partnered with the IRS in the EITC program over the years. And if you're familiar with that program, that's a very significant program with over $6,000 of max money available to low-income residents, and that is also very difficult to get to get
Do
people to apply to.
we know how many Philadelphians are actually eligible for this? I know you said 885 applicants, but how many are actually eligible for this benefit?
We don't have that number because we don't have the the income number for every resident. That's not how our tax system works. We don't have. Our wage tax is collected by the employer and remitted by the employer, so we don't have every Philadelphian filing a tax return like they do at the state level or at the federal level, so that becomes the challenge.
Okay. I heard a buzzer. Is that my time? Can I add the rest to the second round, or you want me to keep going?
Okay. Did you have a follow-up?
I do have another question. So, we talked about, so the federal government provides this, right? And I don't understand why we can't just tag it on to how the federal government applies for taxes, or Councilmember Harity just said, or we can't use income tax from the year before to make this determination. Because it really seems like an undue burden for us to make people apply for another tax credit that they don't even know exists. And I don't know how this information is being distributed, but for us to be the largest, poorest city, in general, 885 people seems very low.
Yeah, we
concerning
agree
folks
that
that are eligible for this benefit.
we agree that it is underutilized. Obviously, the pandemic presented problems for us in getting the communication out there because we do a lot of in-person events, and they were paused during the pandemic. But even with that, it is a really difficult message to get out. We not only engage this directly, our communication directly to taxpayers, but we also communicate with tax professionals. So we want to make accountants and tax professionals aware of this so that when they're doing a person's tax return, they can at the same time do the refund petition.
Because I think we should really move forward to making sure this is something that's automated and easy for people to access. Because like I said, if we want to really help people immediately with cash in hands, the 47 cents on the dollar as opposed to $800 to $900 up front immediately is very different when you're a low-income family trying to make ends meet.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gautier.
Thank you, Council President. First, I agree with Councilmember Brooks on both points. Last year, when we were talking about and being pushed really hard by the Chamber on the BRT tax cuts, every time I sat with the Chamber, I told them that if we were talking about helping small Black and brown businesses, then that's what we should do, as opposed to considering a proposal that overwhelmingly supported bigger businesses who do have the capacity to pay taxes. And so I know that there are challenges with considering a higher exemption, but I'm hoping that it's something that we could at least explore. And, I do think there needs to be some honesty in who's seeing the most benefit from these proposals. On the campaign always says Black and brown businesses, but that's not the reality. And then on the wage taxes, I wanted to know if you could actually detail the amount that goes in the average citizen's pocket with this proposed cut to the wage tax versus the amount that it costs the city.
Yep, we can do that. We've provided the amount it costs the city, and we'll get you the amount that goes to residents, and we'll break that out by different income levels so you can see what it means.
Okay, but you don't have that or an estimate of that?
Not off the top of my head, but we'll get you that.
Okay, thank you. I just think that I support the cause of putting more money in our residents' pockets, obviously, but I think people need to be able to weigh be able to do a cost-benefit analysis on a few bucks a week in their pocket versus the trash being picked up, or a few bucks a week in their pocket versus a nuisance business that we can't shut down that's leading to shootings and drug activity in their neighborhoods. I also was wondering, can you talk about the amount that the tax cuts cost the city in terms of the wage tax proposal and how we plan to replace the revenue?
Sure. So it costs about $75 million over the life of the plan, starting around 13 and then growing a little bit each year as the tax base grows. And the reason that we propose these reductions is that we have seen from numerous studies that they help grow the economy. So the way that the way that money is replaced is with a stronger economy, with more jobs and more revenue for the city.
Okay, has that borne out in our past experience?
So there have been studies that look at what happened as a result in prior years, a long time ago, tax increases and then what happens in reductions, and those studies have shown, yes, that tax changes for the wage tax and the business tax have an impact on how many jobs there are in the city.
Locally here in Philadelphia?
Sorry?
Are those studies related to actual
Yes,
things that happen?
specifically to Philadelphia, yes.
Okay, thank you. Is it appropriate to ask questions of OPA at this time, or no?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I have comments and I have some questions. So last year, citizens across the city were dismayed at the news that their property taxes would be increasing, in some cases by more than 200%. I understand that OPA's goal is to assess all properties in a uniform way, but simply put, these results were and still are shocking. But now that we're here, I have some questions about the processes surrounding pending assessment appeals and the impacts of these assessments on largely black and brown neighborhoods. I think there's two pieces of this problem that we as a city are morally obligated to explore. First, while the margin of error citywide may be within the range of best practices, that completely breaks down once you zoom in at the neighborhood level. We see wildly inconsistent assessments on very similar houses across the street from one another, and it's worth looking at if those inconsistencies are more prevalent in black and brown neighborhoods. The second is that I see third district neighborhoods of color getting assessed much higher than other comparable neighborhoods of color in other parts of the city. My district is 75% black and saw the most homeowners with assessments that went up by more than 50% in the entire city. And with this in mind, I think we can actually identify statistically significant metrics that will show that there is racial bias in what's happening here, which we can then incorporate into our assessment methodology, which could possibly control for this happening in the future. And we've talked to folks at OPA about some of the difficulties in having, more of a racial equity lens to this work, but I think it has to be something that we try. And so I have a few questions. One, after the assessments are done, would it be possible to perform an analysis of the assessments through a racial equity lens to make sure that we are not unfairly penalizing black and brown neighborhoods? And how much would a study like that cost? What is the estimated timeline to complete the 20,000 outstanding first level review requests, and how many outstanding appeals are there? We see in OPA's budget detail that 179 of 225 budgeted full-time positions are currently filled. And so I wanted to know what, if any, role does staffing capacity play in the timeline of the disposition of first-level reviews and appeals? And then lastly, could you explain the tiers of calculating assessments and why there seems to be such great disparity from property to property on similar blocks?
Sure. Good morning. James Arrows, Chief Assessment Officer, OPA. So just to go through, hopefully I caught everything you were asking with this round. So as far as the racial equity lens after the fact, I know we've had discussions with your office, and we had a pretty thorough and well-received presentation a couple months ago for folks in your office that were interested in understanding the full process and the mass appraisal and modeling. And as we said at that time, and as I'll say again today for the record, we're more than happy to roll up and provide the data to anybody that is interested in looking through that racial equity lens. It does become particularly problematic for our office to do that because for one reason, the state license that we need to maintain, though using that kind of information or even really having it in the conversation is strictly forbidden. So we understand the need and the problems that have been around for years, and we're cognizant of it, but we are not the department to specifically look at that and make a determination of how it's affecting certain demographics in the city, because we don't, number one, keep demographic information on owners, nor do we apply that in the assessment process. But we're more than happy and more than willing to assist and work hand in hand with somebody that wants to do that analysis and give them all the information necessary in order to kind of look through that and come back to us with any thoughts they have and discuss what's being found as far as that.
Which department is the department that cares about this?
I know there's a couple different departments that may want to get involved. Certainly, I'm sure council has an interest. I don't know if planning and development or there's any other departments that would be interested in that, but we can provide the data to and assist with the process to whomever wants to crunch those numbers and come up with the conclusions.
I just want to be clear that, and I know we had a lot of the admin here yesterday, and we're going to do the mayor's office at some point, but I just want to be clear that somebody has to care about this enough to make it happen. At this point in West Philadelphia, there is a pressure on housing prices from university development, other institutional development, the growth of the life sciences, and the city cannot be in the business of displacing our residents, right? We have to care that this is hitting, in particular, working class homeowners in black neighborhoods really, really hard. Yep. And somebody has to care enough about it to actually look at that data and to do something about it.
Yes, and we in finance can take the lead in making sure that happens. And I mean, to your point, the reason that we have all the relief programs that we've talked about is to try to make sure we don't displace people.
The relief programs are not enough. The relief programs are not enough. I've been walking in rooms with community members since these assessments happened, and there's nothing but anger and worry because people cannot handle the burden that has been placed on them. While other actors who have much more in terms of resources are consistently getting abatements, or we're talking about tax cuts, these are the people that are carrying the burden of funding and financing the city, and they need help.
Right, and I agree, and that is why we do things like the homestead and like the senior freeze and like the payment programs to make sure that we can provide assistance to people. And as I said, we're happy to take the lead in making sure that this analysis gets done.
Somebody has to care about the racial equity aspect of this.
Understood.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you. That's why we need to borrow that next $100 million. We can build more affordable homes for people can actually live in. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson for a point of information.
Information for the record, because OPA is saying you can't use racial data, but in districts such as Councilman Jamie Gordier's, Councilman Darrell Clark's, Councilman Curtis Jones, Councilwoman Lozada, and myself, and Bass, we've seen areas where neighborhoods that are particularly black and brown, the overassessment of lower value homes. And we've always questioned what is the OPA formula and how you go about doing your assessments and addressing when that value is totally off. And so even separate from the racial part, if you look at the data, right, the data shows that in some areas which are predominantly black and brown, there's a significant amount of overassessment of homes. And so how are we addressing that aspect? Because it goes into the same thing of basically addressing things to a racial equity lens. You can still address it without talking about race, because these areas where that's being overassessed are basically poor people. And then they have to go into the process to file for first level of review, and everybody will have their time to go through that process. And then if you fail the first level of review, everybody don't get a lawyer to go in front of BRT, or some don't even have the wherewithal to go through that process. So I guess on a bigger scale as well, how are you addressing it? Because that's happening in particularly black and brown neighborhoods, according to the data that we have right here.
Yeah, so as far as the, lower valued homes versus higher valued homes, we do look at that. We make no assumptions as to who lives there or what their income level is, but we do have industry standard measures, a price-related differential that we publish and that we do every year.
Let me back up. You said make no assessments. That's cool, but you should be able to say, whoa, this is interesting. All these first level reviews are basically coming from, just from the data and zip codes where there's black and brown poor people. Like, somebody have to pick up and say, whoa, something's wrong with this picture, because there's no different than the city controller's report that show this is happening predominantly in black and brown neighborhoods. So at least at that point, we should have paused as a city and said, wait a minute. And this is from the city controller, so your office may not do it, But the city controller did her due diligence and showed, particularly in black and brown neighborhoods, the last assessment showed that we were being over-assessed as compared to other neighborhoods. And so at what point in time do we pause and say something's wrong with this picture in terms of our formula and how we're going about addressing it? At least that's what I'm looking for in terms of clarity as a follow-up to...
So in terms of what I was saying with the lower, so if we see that lower valued homes wherever in the city, for instance, seem to be, there's a chance they're being over-assessed a little bit, and that's something, you know, every time we go to do, okay, we see that this might have, our numbers weren't as good as we wanted to be here, have we, what could have been the problem? Was there enough sales? Was there an even distribution? Those are all things that when we do things, we build models for different sections of the city. So if you get too granular or you carve up, some reports are doing statistics by census tract or zip code. The real estate market doesn't behave a certain way because there's a zip code that draws a line in the middle of the street or a census tract that ends here. It could be bigger, it could be smaller. So we have, approximately 600 individual neighborhood market areas that we created in 13 citywide zones for residential. So people can be in smaller buckets, but also in larger ones. So some of the analysis that was done outside are using and breaking some of the information out in ways that we don't use it, so the numbers will look a little different. But as far as the lower versus higher value properties, yes, those are after we come out and we look at it, and before we proceed with the next, or as we're proceeding with the next revaluation, we say, okay, we know our numbers might have been not as good as we would have liked here. Is there a reason we can point to? Was it data hadn't been refreshed in a couple years? Was it that there wasn't a lot of sales? So, the more representation as far as sales transactions of types of properties you have, the more reliable you can feel about the values you project. If it's a smaller number, the numbers could be all over the place, and the reliability of any one sale, certainly, or a small group of sales, may not be. It's harder to have a lot of confidence if you don't have a lot of sales for a particular area. And areas wherever it may be in the city where sales aren't or the market hasn't been as active, those are values that will have a value, but we will feel a little less confident because there aren't as many representations to sort of say one way or another. But those are things that we look at after every reassessment, after every revaluation, and those are things we'll be looking at ahead of the planned revaluation next year. I don't have handy FLR numbers for council districts or certain neighborhoods of the city, but we will certainly take a look at that to see where the predominance of some of these first level reviews did come in over time. And historically, we've seen that sometimes, especially in the ABI years, a lot of people just filing because they just weren't sure about the process. And then other years, it's been reflective of more of where the changes were the most, whether that was necessarily reflective of the accuracy of the reassessment or not. But I think that we'll be looking at that certainly prior to the next revaluation, and it's all stuff that we always look to improve our numbers. So we're not going to ignore what has happened in the past and say that it was good enough. We're always looking to improve.
Council President, I'm going to wrap up, but I know you created a committee, an ABI committee, and I just want to move to add that if you could consider adding a diversity and equity aspect to that task, to the committee that you created.
Yes.
So when the next time around, before these new assessments come in, there has to be a racial equity lens that's a part of this conversation, regardless of, they say that's just regular data and sales, but at the end of the day, the numbers shows that it's predominantly black and brown neighbors, which is a racial aspect. So I just want to add that.
Yeah, I mean, that information, frankly speaking, is accessible. I mean, you could just overlap on a census tract. You could determine the demographics of that particular area. It's not rocket science. So we'll figure that. And thank you for that recommendation, Councilman. Councilman Jones, you had a point of information also?
Thank you. So I don't know what prohibits you from looking at it from a racial equity lens, but I would, as a full disclosure Pennsylvania Human Relations Commissioner, warn our city to say that there is a thing called disparate impact. And you may not consider it a racial equity lens, you may not consider it being relevant, but if it has a negative, overwhelming impact on a race or group of people, we are liable. And so I would caution you to to kind of listen a little closer to see how we can guard ourselves against that kind of statistical outcome that seems to be an anomaly just to people of color. And I'm surprised that we A, have not been sued, and then B, when we start looking at every year, we have to produce a affordability plan to HUD that shows how we are considering all of these factors to make sure housing stays affordable, that we can not include this statistical anomaly. And our corrections need to be according to what's happening to real people. And so, whether it's this department, whether it's that department, it's the city. And we really need to take a closer look at that as we start to unravel, some of these impacts on neighborhoods that happen to be of color. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman Vaughn. You had a point of information. Councilwoman Bass, thank you for being patient.
It's obvious that this system isn't working. And just throw it all out. Who created it? And if it's affecting us the most, throw the shit out. Let's do something differently. It's not working. And truthfully, you guys, do you have a layman person that can talk to us? Because I don't understand half of the stuff that you're saying. You're not making a lot of sense, at least to me. It's not being clear. And why do we keep going over this over and over again? It's not working. Find something else new that is not going to hurt people that look like me.
Thank you. Councilman, did you have a point of what? Okay. Point of information, or just tell me. Point of information. No. Just trying to.
10 seconds.
Some point we'll get back to the traditional. People waiting until their turn comes to ask questions. All right.
Okay.
We're getting a little carried away with this point of information.
Yeah, I wait till my turn, but just in 20 seconds, I just want to say I echo the sentiments of our colleagues. I think that I don't know what there's a legal reason of why you can't look at the racial demographics, but you certainly can look at zip codes. And I think there's a way to get beyond whatever legal thing that you might be prohibiting you from doing this, which I don't think there is. But if there is, I think it's just really important for you to find a way. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
I haven't, Councilmember Gautier put one or two other questions on the record. I could answer now if that's, or I can.
Yeah, the bottom line is there's a way of determining by census tracts in particular, because there's more detail in terms of the demographics of a particular section of the city. We have that information, you have that information, the city planner, so to overlay these various areas, one, to get to a place where you can determine those areas of concern, not only racial, but the economics of those people in those census tracts. So while it may not be your specific job, Mr. Olmos, somebody in the city does have that, and if you just do an overlay over those various areas.
Absolutely, and we've had conversations with outside entities that have reached out and said, hey, we want to work with you on this. Our recently retired director of mass appraisal is sort of making this sort of like a national campaign. So, we're cognizant that there are issues that exist, and although we may not be able to look at it a certain way, we certainly want to work with the people that can look at it a certain way and sort of work through the process. And we're not sitting here saying that there might not be a problem. It's just obviously certain restrictions for how we do the values and how we look at it, but we can help anybody that wants to do that next layer to give them all the information and work with us to make sure that they're looking at it in a way that maybe we can't, but helps them drill down to a problem. But for the first level review question, so we received a little less than 20,000 first level review requests. About a quarter of those came in the period where we extended the deadline from September through to December. So that extension, we would have had about a little less than 15,000 prior to that, and that another 5,000 came in. So the extension did show a significant number of people that took advantage of that. As of yesterday, we're about 15% through those. We expect that to be ramped up pretty significantly as folks are getting into the as they're getting out there, they're calling people, making appointments, and they're trying to, get to a couple blocks and maybe knock out a bunch of these at a time. So we certainly expect those numbers to pick up significantly in the coming weeks. 15%. So roughly 3,000 or so of the 20,000 have had decisions made. That number is going to keep, and that pace will increase in the coming weeks as folks are getting out there and they're able to get in the neighborhoods where they're able to make inspections if that's necessary, and get to these properties if the homeowners will allow us in, or if they want to meet us at the door and give us information and whatnot. And then as far as the vacancies, the vacancies, they're kind of spread through different areas, but, we do have evaluator positions that are included there. So the less evaluators we have, then, there's more accounts that an individual may have. It wasn't reflected on the information you have because that was as of the end of calendar 22. But we do have another 12 additional folks that'll be starting as of next month, and we'll have another test going out. And so we're getting people in, which is good, that's the largest group we've had starting in several years. And part of that was through the budget approved by council last year was where we were working the management trainee position, that's more of a citywide thing, into our department as a feeder system to get folks into the department. So that's the biggest class we've had in a while, and we'll see if that pace picks up, but it's, we're going to be able to fill more of those gaps at once than we've been to any single time in the last few years since I've been in this seat at least. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair now recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, listen, a lot of what I wanted to say really has been said, but I did want to drill down on a point. And let me ask a question first. So did you read the report around the increase in real estate taxes and what neighborhoods it was primarily happening in, which were primarily black and brown neighborhoods? Did you read the report?
I've read a number of reports. Is there a specific
So you read a number of reports that said that same thing?
Yes.
Okay. And so did you feel that there was any need to take any action after reading those reports? Was there any thought process, meetings, conversation? We got a problem here. Even though you're prohibited in some ways of looking at it racially, but when you read that, was there any action or any suggested action?
Yeah, I mean, we're always having conversations, and we do after action all the time. So a suggested action as, hey, is there something we should be doing for specific sectors of the city or certain populace? Not specifically, but what we are able to do is say, okay, this section of the city, no matter who lives there may have been an issue, or the assessments are not as accurate as perhaps we would like. We have those conversations all the time. So when we look at a neighborhood and say, okay, well, what was or a section, what was the reason why maybe these didn't, score as high metrically as some of the other areas? Is there a number of sales that's less than other areas? I mean, that's the outside market. We can't control that, but it's like, okay, were we capturing all the sales that could have been used? And then, some reports and markets say, well, this person lives X amount of blocks away and their house was valued as this and this person is valued as that. We don't have the detail like at that time to say, what's the difference? Are they in a different market area from what we would consider? I mean, in Philadelphia city neighborhoods, but we do know that in some areas you go 2-3 blocks, that's considered, that's labeled a different neighborhood, or people treat the market differently, or it could be, miles of area that kind of have the same general market. So
I guess what I'm saying here is that if you have knowledge that there is a problem in particular neighborhoods, and you just said that you were aware, based on what you had read, that there were specific problems in specific neighborhoods, primarily African American and Latino neighborhoods, and there was not any sort of call of action, any sense of urgency that we need to do something because these are the people who are most at risk to losing their homes. I think that I want to say it's a problem, but it's way bigger than being a problem. It's a mindset, it's a culture that has displaced a lot of folks in the city of Philadelphia. And beyond that, when Councilwoman Brooks mentioned that 885, or on your questioning around programs and services, to help with low-income folks around, their taxes, and 885 people, I think, was the number who applied for those services through the Revenue Department. And, the sort of the lack of sense of urgency that I feel right now is just, it's beyond frustrating. We, the city of Philadelphia, we cannot be bystanders in what's happening. And that's exactly what you're doing. That's exactly what you are bringing to us. You are allowing things to happen in the market and not addressing populations that you know are vulnerable. And it just shouldn't be.
And I don't think that's what he was saying at all. I think what he was saying is we do look at the results. If there are areas where assessments look off, we know it's a problem, and we take action to try to correct it as we do the next assessment.
Well, then please tell me what the action is, because I'm not seeing it. Please, if you are, then I would just like to see what the action is. Because based on what you've given us thus far, I don't see it. I'd like to see it, because we're the ones who are out in the neighborhoods, and we hear it. Oh boy, do we hear it. Loud and clear. And so I don't know how often y'all been out in the neighborhoods. If you've heard it, maybe you should go door to door. I'll be happy to take you in some of my neighborhoods in the district so you can hear it.
No, we've heard it.
People are upset. People are frustrated. And we know what's happening. People are losing, listen, the cost of everything's going up. Inflation is through the roof. And so if we can help them get a couple more dollars, if we can help them, save their property, their family home, then what is the action that we're taking to do it? A robust action in response to a very heavy real estate increase, property tax increase from last year. What is our action to make sure that we're helping to keep people in their homes? Please tell me.
So two things. One, and AJ can talk about what they do specifically to improve assessments, but last year we put more relief measures in on the tax side, right? We increased the homestead dramatically, which has a much bigger impact on low-value homes than high-value homes, right? Because if your homestead is going from 45 to 80, and your home is valued at 100,000, it's taking out a really big
I understand what the homestead exemption.
Yeah,
I get it. Right. So what else did we do? We increased the homestead. What else? Have we done? Yeah.
We increased loop. We continue to outreach to make sure that people got all the relief measures that they were eligible for. We have our payment plan on the revenue side so that people can enter into payment plans to make sure that they don't lose their homes. So we've put in a number of measures to make sure that doesn't happen.
And what I'm telling you is that is not enough. And that it doesn't feel that there is a sense of urgency around this very urgent problem that we have in our city right now. And I think that, there needs to be a conversation where you all go back to the drawing board, hopefully today, and say, we got to do something. We got to do something right now, because people are losing out.
Yeah, so, we agree it's urgent. And
it feels like sitting here that we are bystanders.
And
that the administration is content to sit by and let the market do what the market does, and we just can't do that.
And that's not what
I'm just telling you.
I understand what
just
you're
telling
saying,
you my perspective of it.
I
know you feel differently.
Yeah.
Because you're not one of the people I'm talking to out in the street,
But
with all due respect.
One of the things we talked about today is that this city has one of the most robust set of protections for homeowners of any city in the country. So I'm getting to the point where you're saying that it's not something that we're making a priority, and we have.
I think the point is, and I don't know that you're necessarily getting it, and I'm going to end on this point, is that whatever we are doing is not enough. It's not cutting the mustard. We need to do more. There is not a sense of urgency that matches the need in the community. And that's what I'm trying to really relate to you. So,
no, I understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Member Bass. Chair recognizes Member Harity.
Thank you. All right, my questions are one for revenue and two for the city treasurer. What are the current methods that a taxpayer can pay their taxes to the city, and how is the department expanding these methods of payment, including online, mail, or payment in person? And then for the treasurer's office, part of the job for the city treasurer is to serve as a disbursement agent for the city-related payments. What is the average time for treasurer to reimburse funds to vendors, and how is the treasurer attempting to improve this lag time for vendors?
Frank Breslin, Revenue Commissioner. Council member, your question was methods of payment for taxes? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything walking up. So we accept all methods of payment. Cash in the municipal services building, so in the public service concourse of the building, we have cashiers that can accept cash. We also have satellite offices that can accept payment. They do not accept cash, but they accept checks. So we have walk-in. We also accept checks by mail. So we process checks that come in, remittance, and of course we encourage taxpayers to use electronic payments, and so we accept electronic payments. We have a new integrated tax system that we implemented over the last couple of years, which has a totally modern portal for taxpayer electronic interaction where they can do lots of services, applications, payments, filing, and makes it much simpler for them to be able, for taxpayers to be able to pay electronically. They can now, in our new system, they can pay electronically without having an account established. We called it a non-logged in payment, so it makes it very simple for them to go in and identify what year and what tax they want to make that electronic payment for. 75% of our payments are coming in electronically now. So we're very pleased with that number.
Okay, thank you. And then the city treasurer, part of the job, as I said, for the city treasurer is to serve as the disbursement agent for city-related payments. What is the average time for the treasurer to disperse funds to vendors, and how is the treasurer attempting to improve the lag times for vendors?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Harity. The Treasurer's Office is at the end of the payment process, and so we are able to issue payments to vendors either electronically or by check after the department submits the voucher. It's reviewed and approved by the finance department, then the city controller, and then at that point our office is able to release payment or to cut checks to vendors. I would defer to my colleagues in finance to talk about more information on the payment process, but we would really encourage vendors, where possible, to sign up for electronic payment to help cut down on any mail.
Right. How long does the process take? How many days is the lag? Is it 30 days, 90 days, 180 days?
We'd have to get you that information. We can provide that information for you. The lag between when we get an invoice to when the payment is received by the vendor.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult to track that information in our legacy accounting system right now, but we can get you some information on that as a follow-up.
Yeah, my concern is for small businesses that are doing business with the city. You know, the difference between 30 and 180 or 90 days is a lot, and could mean the difference of them succeeding or not succeeding. So if you could please get me that information, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
Do I have any time left? All right. Another question I have is actually for the pension department, and I'd also like to echo Isaiah Thomas's remarks about Fran, Chris, and Bill. They're good to work with. I would like to know what the time between the application for retirement and the actual payment for their retirement benefits. My sister over there, yes, that's it.
Thank you, Councilman Francis, BLE Executive Director, Board of Pensions.
Hey, Fran.
For you and for Councilperson Vaughn, everyone else. 4 weeks from the date of appointment, with a caveat, assuming the person brings all of their paperwork, whether it's a marriage certificate, driver's license, divorce decree, all the necessary paperwork, roughly 4 weeks.
So roughly 4 weeks. That's not bad. Why is the target number of the 457 plan for FY23 less than FY22's actual? In other words, why shouldn't the Board of Pension encourage every city worker to contribute to the deferred contribution?
Great question. And beyond my control, it's not my rule. We are required to put in target projections on a quarterly basis well in advance of the end of the prior fiscal year. And we surpassed the previous year target, but I didn't change the target because we had already submitted it.
Right.
I wouldn't do that. So we actually surpassed the target that year by, well, you can see the number you have in the testimony. So we made a target for FY24, 25,500. I will also add that we currently have, as of July 1st, 2022, the actuarial report, 26,723 active city employees. We have 25,867 participants in the 457 plan. Our third-party provider nationwide does great work at the insistence of the board, going out to various departments, not electronically, but in person. They go to the airport on different shifts. They go to the police precincts on the different shifts. They go to the streets department in person, because a lot of those folks don't have access to a computer during the day. And they are encouraging people to participate in the 457 plan, especially those who are part of the hybrid pension plan, Plan 16, because that's very important to their retirement security.
Yeah, I would agree. So any way that they can put an extra couple dollars in their pockets during retirement is a good thing.
It makes a big difference, and even it's pre-tax money, unless you're in the Roth portion of it. So if you're putting in, I was going to make this number up, $50, it's really only about $40-some coming out of your net pay. So you already have on the plus side if you do that. So I would encourage everyone to participate in the deferred compensation plan.
Member Lozada.
By,
Oh, is that Vaughn?
by
She was next
people-
anyway.
It's on, that are preparing to retire, that you are anywhere from 3 to 6 months behind in providing pension checks to people that are retiring. I went as far as myself to try to schedule an appointment, because I plan to do it real soon in the next 8 months, and I was told I could not do it because I had come too soon. But there is colleagues of mine that said that they were also informed that it would take almost 6 months. So you're saying we're talking about 2 pay cycles? They will start getting their pension? You said...
From the date of the appointment,
Right.
about 4
And if
weeks until they
everything
get their...
is okay, they have everything they need. Now, can they come to you prior to their last day and make sure that they have everything in place? Do you see them prior to that?
They could make an appointment with us prior to the last day. However, we can't process anything until we get the report of separation.
Right.
So it could be helpful for them to come to us and get everything in place, sit down with a counselor, talk about the ins and outs, have any questions answered. However, we do have to wait until we get the report of separation. Now, normally the appointments are made by the human resources person from the particular department
Right.
in order to ensure the HR people know when the person is separating.
When should that appointment be made to get things in place so that
Yeah,
they,
it could be made whenever the person knows when they will be leaving.
long as they have a date of
That's
retirement?
correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
And sometimes they're busier than others, of course.
Now you're trying to get out of...
No, I'm just telling you, we had, especially during the pandemic, unlike some city departments, we did not miss a beat during the pandemic because people were still retiring. In fact, we had many more people retiring during the pandemic than other times. So we did not miss a beat, and that's thanks to our wonderful staff that we have. And you see many of them back here. And Councilman Thomas and Harity both made very nice comments about myself and a couple other people. But that's to all of our colleagues. That's all of us. The pension board is a very good staff. They work very hard, and we hope to retire one day also. So we're all really in the same boat, and we try to understand, and we do understand that people are retiring, and not everybody has money sitting around in order to pay bills. We try to get them processed as quickly as we can, and we really do.
Well, I've been getting a lot of positive response. I haven't met him personally. Shahid or Mr. Lloyd, that is very responsive to me. Thank you very much in the preparation of this process. And I'm glad to hear that it's not taking as long, because we do have one individual that was real concerned she wouldn't be able to meet her financial obligations. So I'm going to get back to her, make sure she reaches out to you, and then also tell her that you said within 2 pay cycles. Thank you.
Now? Okay, I'm sorry. I hope that you all are hearing the frustration, because it's the frustration that we're hearing every day. And for those of us that are knocking on doors every day in the last few months, it becomes a little sad for us to be able to tell people there's nothing that we can really do, because all we can offer you is Homestead and a program like Loop. What I'd like to know is, if we know that there are specific zip codes where the assessments are not appropriate, and those individuals haven't applied for one of these 2 programs, why is it that before we send them to collections, we can't reach out to them to encourage them or automatically enroll them in programs like Homestead?
Yes.
That's number 1. Number 2, I'd also like to know, are there outside agencies currently assisting revenue in collection efforts? How many of them have a substantial physical presence in the city? And what is the percentage of revenue being collected by outside agencies? So I know that's a lot, but I wanted to make sure I get it all in the right.
Yeah, and those are really, both of your questions are really revenue questions, so I'll ask the Revenue Commissioner to come up and address those.
Frank Breslin, Revenue Commissioner. The first question, with delinquencies, we do do a lot of outreach around our protections and our programs, so that we can enter the taxpayers into payment agreements. Our payment agreements have, I've worked with Councilmember Bass over the years. When it was felt that our payment agreements were too rigid and required too much of a down payment, and so over the years we've made our payment agreements much more manageable for people, and our OPA payment agreements in particular, which are geared towards homeowners, residents, are affordable payment programs with our lowest tier for lowest income people, is a payment agreement where there's actually a $0 amount that they have to pay each month, but it keeps them in their home and protects them from enforcement. So we really do try to make people aware of all of these programs and enroll them, and we have a group that will assist with the enrollment process to try to make that as easy as possible. I talked a little earlier about our new tax system, which makes it easier for taxpayers that are kind of have a little technical proficiency and want to do it online, that now they can apply for some of those programs online. But we also realize that many need a personal touch, so we do have our communications group partnering with council on any events that you have, and we'll have people there to help them become aware of the programs and to enroll. Auto enrollment becomes difficult. Deputy Commissioner Chris talked a little bit about the efforts that we've done over the last year. So we are trying to auto-enroll people in programs where it's feasible. Sometimes it's just not feasible. We don't have the information, or there's multiple programs that they may be eligible for, and we don't know which one is going to be the best for them. So we don't want to put them into a program that might not be the best program for them. So we want to sit down with them and help them understand what is the best program for them in particular.
But how about can't we start off with Homestead, right? It's the easiest program to enroll in. And we know that these people are in delinquency. So why not automatically enroll them in Homestead as opposed to allowing them to accrue penalties?
So we are...
And we have their contact because they're in our system, so there's no reason why we can't do it.
If we have information that indicates that taxpayers are eligible for Homestead, so we have to know, right? We know if the taxpayer is delinquent, but we don't know on that property whether that is their homestead or not, whether they're living there, right? So we need to ascertain that. Now, if we know from a different program that they're enrolled in, or maybe from data from the water department, then we will put them into Homestead. So we try to do that wherever possible, but we don't always know. What is really important, though, I want to really stress, is we want to get people that are delinquent into, and it's their principal residence, into OPA, our owner-occupied payment agreement, because that is really the greatest protection for them. It makes them compliant. It's by its nature an affordable program. Their monthly payment is going to be based on their income, and as I said, the monthly payment can be as low as, at one point the monthly payment was minimum monthly payment was $25 per month. But we realized that even that was not enough protection for some very vulnerable citizens. So now we have a program where the payment is actually $0 a month. If they give us their income information and show us that it is their principal residence, we'll keep them, we'll allow them to stay in that property, and they will not be subject to any enforcement actions. And as was said earlier, it's probably one of the most progressive programs in the nation. So we do take it really seriously, and we do try to enroll as many people as we can, and we want to simplify the process. And I think we've made progress every year, but it is incremental. And as I said earlier, the pandemic certainly curtailed the outreach that we could do, the in-person outreach, which is the most effective. We have had people go, we've had staff go door to door, and it's not really effective for a lot of programs, but it is effective for Homestead. So we've gone door to door to try to get people in areas where we know there's a high level of delinquency. We'll have people go door to door and try to get people enrolled in Homestead, and then also give them pamphlets about other protections so that they can enroll.
Do we know approximately how many people in the city that are delinquent are not enrolled in Homestead or in a relief program?
I don't know that number. We could take a look and see if there's a way to ascertain that, but I don't know that number.
That's information we should know, and we should know it broken down by district. Right? Well, because if I'm on the ground, I want to be able to reach out to my constituency to say, you qualify. You may have tried several ways. You may not be someone they trust or someone they know, but someone like me who's there elected is someone that they would probably respond to. And so,
Yeah, and we really want to partner with you because I think you nailed it right there, that we're not always, a party that a taxpayer feels comfortable coming to, especially someone who's delinquent. So we want to partner with you and do events in your district, and we can work on ways of getting notices out to people who are delinquent and inviting them, having you invite them to an event, and then we will have staff there to help get them enrolled. And just to my earlier statement, just to be clear, is we do know how many delinquent taxpayers are not enrolled in whether it's Homestead or another relief program. We don't know from that group how many are eligible. So, we know how many aren't, but out of that subset, we don't know how many are eligible, and that's the real challenge.
yeah, and I think we as district representatives would be able to help you, right? If
Yes.
we're out knocking on doors and we're talking to people, and we know that Mary Thomas lives at this residence, this is her house, and I'm talking to her. And so if we know where they are and who they are, it may be easier for us to get them the support that they need in order for them to be able to stay in their homes. And then I think my other question, I have several, but I want to add another one. I am under the impression that folks who received assessments that were extremely high and who are waiting for their appeal process are being told to pay a portion or all of their taxes for this fiscal year, and then we'll figure it out later. I'm not really sure. But what is that process? How, if someone's assessment came out too high and they applied for an appeal, what happens next?
Okay, so if someone filed an appeal with the Board of Revision of Taxes, they are permitted to pay the amount of tax that they owed in the prior year, and then at the end of the appeal process, when it's determined how much they owe, if they owe any additional monies, then they can pay it. We bill them the additional amount, and they can pay that with no interest or penalty. So, and we did send out notification. We get a file from the Board of Revision of Taxes of everyone who appealed, and we send them, each of those that appealed, a notice informing them of their ability to pay the taxes on the prior year and what that amount was.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just to add to that, that is for appeals to the Board of Revision of Taxes. That does not apply to first level reviews. I mean, many people, I think, that maybe do first level reviews also have BRT appeals in, and that would cover them. But if it's an FLR, a first level review, they have to pay the current year tax.
And that's the problem, right? Because we're asking some folks who are in neighborhoods where development has exasperated their bills. And so for a low-income family who is being affected as a result of development in their communities, asking them to pay $5,000 and $6,000 is a problem, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do we help? What do we do in that type of situation? Because I have many people like that, and I'm sure that there are other council people here whose residents are experiencing the same.
Yes, and we work with taxpayers. In that situation, we work with taxpayers on a case-by-case basis. If they contact us with a challenge to pay their current year taxes, we try to work out an agreement where, they'll pay that incrementally, so we do work with them, but there's not a prescribed program that allows them to pay a lower amount.
All right, thank you. And then I asked about the outside agencies who are assisting in collection efforts, and are they in the city? Are they Who are they, and what is the percentage if they are outside agencies? What is the percentage of revenue that they're helping us collect?
Yes, can I get, we have that information is on our website, all of our collection agencies who work for us, but there are several. So, and we have a report that I can give to you that shows each of the agencies, where they're located, what taxes they are collecting for us, basically what their portfolio is, so we can get that to your office.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
On her point, what is the percentage attached? Is that on top of the delinquency? Are they able to put a surcharge?
Oh, the collection percentage?
Yes.
Yeah. It varies. The collection percentage varies based on the tax, essentially the kind of the nature of the portfolio. And some of those get added on, and some of those are not added on to. So it really is a mixture because we have multiple agencies. Some are doing legal work for us on real estate tax, and so they're treated a little differently. So the report that I'm going to supply will show the percentages. It'll also enumerate which ones are paid by the taxpayer and which ones are not. So it'll be a breakdown of everything.
So, members, we have 3 people teed up for the second round: Johnson, Thomas, and Brooks. We are. It's 6 now. So we're supposed to take a break at 12:30. What is the pleasure of the group?
Take a break.
Take a break. So it is said we'll recess until, what, 1:30? Is that okay?
Can you answer one question that you asked about pilots?
Yes.
Just before we break. So we have 104 pilots for $16.5 million annually.
Could you provide us a list of who's been generous enough to do that?
Yes.
Not at this moment.
Yep, we can do that.
All right. Thank you. We're on break till 1:30.